Welcome back, everyone. It's Sunday my time. I'm sitting here doing up a quick little video to accompany our Module 2 announcement. And as usual, I like to try to cover some key points. Before actually diving into our Module 2 information, I want to take a minute and give you a little general feedback for your Module 1 assignments, particularly your discussion. I'd really like to encourage you all to read all discussion posts, all right? Not just the one that you're going to respond to, all right? Don't minimize it, and then you're just selling yourself short. Read them all. This will actually allow you to develop a broader perspective. You'll be able to see, oh, hey, I identify with that key point, but not that point over there. I don't understand that. And it might allow you to further explore it and fill in those holes. Throughout it all, I really want you to apply your critical thought. And let me give you a little kind of insight into what I'm looking for when it comes to that. Start with identifying key points within any of the sources that are being highlighted that you check out, like the story about Monique. All right, and then you want to consider how they're being presented. Towards what ends? What's their agenda? All right, what is it trying to tell you? What isn't it trying to tell you? So it's equally important to consider what is presented and what isn't presented, because that gives you a fuller understanding of what it is. Are there key points being addressed? If so, why? And then when you go towards response posts, it's another good thing. You can disagree. It's okay to disagree, right? We just have to do it in a respectful way. Like, hey, I see what you're saying here, and it doesn't quite jive with my own perspective. There's no need to go get antagonistic with folks. And I'm not saying anybody has, nothing like that. So far, everything's great on that. But don't hesitate to have points of disagreement or disjuncture. All right, those points, all right, those points of conflict, they can actually be great sources of new understandings. I often like to say that areas of conflict are also points of creation. That can be very productive. Let's see here, looking over some of my notes. Give support. Support for your perspective, support for your positions. That's always a great thing. I post a lot of extra resources out there that you guys can draw on. You also have your MindEdge learning source, and of course, you're always encouraged to go out and find out new sources that you want to share on your own, all right? Regardless of what you do, always make sure to take the time to give appropriate citation now, all right? Always. We're using APA in here, so brush up on that if you need to. Moving on, looking at my notes. Now we're on to Module 2. Now, Module 2 is really focusing in on globalization, behavior, and culture, and the connections between all these. Now, I like to think of globalization as nothing really new. In fact, from my perspective, globalization has been happening since as long as there's been people. People throughout history have always sought out other people in other places. Well, boom, guess what? That's globalization, right? The only difference between then and now is the frequency with which it happens, all right? Now we have devices like cell phones, smartphones, the internet that can instantly connect you from where you're at to the other side of the world, right? Just boom, like that, you're connected. So the frequency at which connections have made is what's really changed. There's an example about the Aztec, if I remember right, in this week's module that you'll be using in discussion. Some really interesting stuff. Highlights a lot of other associated things that comes with globalization, like colonization. And we touched a little bit about that in our first week's module, just a little, but we'll keep picking at it. One personal example that I like to share when it comes to globalization is, hey, my own personal research. Go figure. If you've checked out my blog and stuff like that, you already have a little insight. But essentially, I look at how people use wildlife in Mali, West Africa, and surrounding countries. And I look at it and I see that all these people, all these different actors are actually intimately connected in these networks from place to place, from local areas to regional areas to global areas. And there are all these values kind of moving back and forth and in between, and they rub against each other. You know, we're talking about those points of contact, points of conflict. They create friction, and friction is creative. Just think about like starting a fire, right? Rub two sticks together, you get fire. All right, it's creative. I know I get a little wacky about that, but yeah, wildlife trade is a unique lens onto the processes and interactions of wildlife trade. I see folks that hunt to feed themselves and support their families. I see hunters that hunt to strictly sell their stuff, to use the skins to make what I call tourist goods, bags, belts, briefcases, shoes, you name it. And then there are also like the private collectors that hire hunters to go like, I want a juvenile female leopard. And a week later, boom, it's caught and it's being shipped clandestinely to some private collector in Europe. I've seen it all. But globalization is a really fascinating topic because it's really focusing on all these connections between places and the transfer of values. So you might want to check out my old research blog. You know, trigger warning: there is lots of pictures of dismembered wildlife. So hey, brace yourself. There's also, I put in a link to a PDF, the Blackwell Companion to Globalization. Now, this is an advanced text, fellas. But if you're really interested in globalization, this is a great one to explore. It's an edited volume, so lots of articles within it. But yeah, I actually challenge you to pick anyone out of it and use it as a support for some of your points in this week's discussion. Let's see here, moving on. Oh yeah, how culture is communicated. Now, we've talked about enculturation. You know, that's the process through which you gain culture, all right? It starts when you're an infant. So we've covered enculturation. You can go back to the previous videos to check that out. But there are two other closely associated concepts that we're going to be talking about this week. One is acculturation. The other is assimilation. Let's start with acculturation. Acculturation is the process that you go through when you move to a new place after you've been enculturated. All right, so say, I'll give you a good example. I was born in Kansas. I moved from Lawrence, Kansas to Switzerland. I went from living like this to living like on this, on the side of a mountain. And not only that, I went from living in a very academic environment, University of Kansas, KU, to living in a how to put it, a mountain village. It had more cows than people. It was a very different reality than what I was used to. I wasn't used to being woken up at 5 every morning by a bunch of cows with bells around their necks in my backyard. Nope. But see, that's where my acculturation of that new culture started. I had to learn what it was, how to be in my new environment. So that's how you need to think about acculturation. If you've ever moved to a new place, you've gone through a process of acculturation. People that immigrate to the U.S. go through a process of acculturation. They have to adopt new ways of being in this new place in order to properly, function within our society. It's really difficult if you stick with your old ways because, the rest of this is society that surrounds you. They're like, well, that's not how we do it here, right? So, acculturation you also need to think of as being kind of like a willful act. You choose to do these things. You choose to adapt to these things. Now, assimilation, completely different. Assimilation we often associate with being forced, right? And there's a million stories of assimilation, but I've highlighted some examples with regard to Native Americans in this week's module announcement, the text below this video. Please take time and check them out. And we used to have a specific political agenda to assimilate Native Americans into larger U.S. society, and it started with removing all of their nativeness, all of their Indianness, any of their unique culture had to be stripped away, right? And it was actually done through pretty aggressive practices of boarding schools. Often Native American children were forcibly taken from their homes, shipped across the country, and they'd have their native name taken away. That was no longer to be said. They couldn't use any of their native language. They had to have their hair cut. They had to wear Western clothes, the works, right? And it was all designed to force them into our Western culture. All right. Now, you can tell I have some feelings about that. I've worked with assimilation through colonization in West Africa a lot. Very similar patterns that you see. There were boarding schools there too. But yeah, check out these resources I've included. They're there for you to further explore and, you know, have good resources to draw on to back up your points when we talk about these things. Moving on. Culture and behavior. Now, what we talk about human culture and how do we differentiate that from animal behavior? Because, hey, we are animals, okay? Homo sapiens sapiens. We are critters. Never forget it. We might not like it, but yeah, we are animals. So how do we actually distinguish what we call culture from other animal behavior? And your text gives you some good examples. You know, you can teach a dog to fetch a stick, but that dog won't teach another dog how to fetch a stick. There are some unique examples, particularly when it comes to other primates, all right, non-human primates. Chimps, bonobos, orangutans, they will all often teach their young specific strategies for collecting food or how to behave in certain situations. Now, it's a bit of a fine line, but we tend to call that protoculture, all right? I know some primatologists that will say, no, it ain't proto, it's full-blown culture. They actually have language to go along with it. So it's a bit of a fine line, but what I think it really comes down to is that we like to differentiate between human culture and animal behavior. Right? Now, I bet in the next 10, 15 years that'll change a lot. In fact, there's been a lot of recent work to recognize that all higher mammals have a higher consciousness. Saw a lot of research about that past couple of years. So let's see here, some other good stuff. Looking at connections between culture and biology, or culture and the environment. Lots of great stuff. I've talked about examples about, you know, what would happen if one sex all of a sudden developed the cultural preference for certain people with, well, say red hair. Well, you're going to get offspring with a lot of red hair. So culture can influence biology and vice versa. Right? One of the greatest examples that I want to share with you is done by a guy named Marvin Harris. And he is the father of this unique kind of theoretical framework that we call cultural ecology. And this is the relationships between culture and the environment and how they intersect and layer and work with one another. Really, really awesome stuff. Some people might take it so far as to call it environmental determinism, that the environment dictates how culture will be. I'm not sure I'd go that far. I like to see it as kind of a two-way street, that one influences the other and vice versa. I think that's a much more pragmatic perspective, but you know, you can feel free to develop your own. Just always remember to support it. Check out the article that I've included a PDF of called, India's Sacred Cattle by Marvin Harris. It is a great piece. It explains why India has this special relationship with cattle, all right? And there's some real insights to it, so definitely check it out. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Special note about starting prep for your milestone projects, because hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, next week, your first part is due, okay? I've already gone in, I've created a whole discussion forum with a ton of resources for you, okay? I'm also a resource, so you can contact me anytime about that. I've put in examples, I've put in all the rubrics for each part. I've also included these videos that were prepared by another instructor for SNHU, and I was going to do my own, but she does such an amazing job. I'm like, why redo it? She already does an amazing job. So I'm using her videos, but you can think it's me talking because I agree with everything she says. Yeah, she's going to be, those videos are a great resource to help orient you to what we're looking for. There's templates, there's examples. Yeah, I suggest you actually start with looking through it all right? That's always a good thing, not piecemeal bits and pieces, but take a good 20 minutes and just look over it all. That way you have a more complete, comprehensive understanding of what's being asked of you. I also want to back that up with, if you have any questions about the Milestone Project or anything else, all right, I'm here for you. Okay, so I'm just a click away. You got my cell phone number. You can Skype me. We can set up a Skype meeting if you want, so we can talk face to face. Well, virtually anyway. Don't hesitate. My goal is to help you all however you need help. Be sure to check the written portion of this announcement for all your due dates for your various assignments. If I remember correctly, you got a discussion and a short answer quiz this week. Double check the written portion of this assignment for those specifics. And that's where I'll leave you for this week. Have a good one.